Welcome to this What Happens Next interview. I'm really excited to have Vicki today. And before we introduce Vicki and she shares her fantastically useful insights, I want to share a little bit about what happens next, just in case this is the first time you've watched one of our videos. Because what happens next, we're on a bit of a mission. And we're on a bit of a mission to redefine what that life looks, a life well lived looks, in that third generation, that third act of our life. I'm a financial planner, a childhood financial planner by profession, but with too many people, I've had conversations where they've said, I've done my career, I've built my wealth, and I don't know whether retirement's that attractive for me. And for many people, actually having a more nuanced, balanced perspective of the next chapter of our life is what we want to explore on What Happens Next. Now, if you're looking at your life and saying, I'm not sure what areas I've got in balance and what areas I haven't, the good news is we've got a free quiz you can take on the What Happens Next website. There's a QR code below that you can click to get access to that quiz. And that quiz will give you a really good start for 10, really good starting point to say, here's where we are, here's where my well-being's strong, and actually I probably don't need as much work, but here's the areas that might want some work. The research and the people who've taken the quiz before, it's interesting because often financial well-being is fairly strong, but social and community well-being, because people have invested so much time in work, social and community well-being are the bits where there's gaps. And the good news is we can all do something about all of those gaps as long as we're conscious of them and we take positive action in the right direction. The other thing before we start with Vicki, I'd encourage you to do, and there'll be a QR code below for this, is sign up to be one of the first people to get the What Happens Next book, which isn't written yet. I mean, I'm 60,000 words in now, but it'll be published next year, so that we can help as many people as possible navigate that stage of their life as successfully as possible. I think that might be the longest introduction I've ever done, Vicki, and I apologise for that because this is about you.
That's all right.
For you today.
That's all right. No worries. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Very good. And just, I'm listening to what you're saying, and it's really funny, that idea that everybody is stuck on. It's like we've gone to the fairground and everybody says, that merry-go-round, that's the really exciting thing to go on. And everybody got on the merry-go-round and everybody's starting to feel a bit sick. And it's not what it was made out to be. You don't want to go up and down, or you don't want to go round and round, or whatever it is, you don't want to do that. And I recognized that for myself quite early on, that I didn't want whatever this traditional life was I was being sold. It wasn't for me. I'm not a 9-to-5 style of person. And that's how I ended up writing my book, The Wealthy Retirement Plan, which you can see over my shoulder that way, the orange book, The Wealthy Retirement Plan. And that is all about the essence. You're calling it What Happens Next, and I'm calling it, the answer to that is a non-traditional retirement, in the sense of, don't just keep working Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, or whatever you do, until someone gives you permission to stop working, and then flop off this roundabout exhausted, and then go, oh, now what do I need to do now? You don't have to do that. If you start from the other way around and go, how do I want to spend my time? How much money do I need in order to live my life the way I want? Work out what's coming in through work. Work out what's coming in through other sources. Work out if there's a gap, and then start to, maybe work more flexibly. Now, big ask, because obviously I'm saying to you, work more flexibly, and maybe your boss doesn't want that. Maybe your boss wants you to work Monday to Friday. But I've noticed that I am spending more time with people, probably because I give myself as much time as I like, as I'm my own boss. But I like to swim now. We're doing cold water swimming on a Friday afternoon. And one of the women I work with works a 4-day week. She works 4 long days, and then she has her Fridays off. And you can do that if you know to ask. And then what you can be doing is having this sense of a semi-retirement now because you're semi-working and you're semi-retired.
So what's really interesting is I posted something on LinkedIn about this the other day, and it started a bit of a debate. And there was somebody who I don't know who chose to comment, who said, I'm not convinced a conventional retirement works for too many people anymore. And you know where my head went? Who invented the convention and who assumes it's a good thing? And I think based on the work we've done, Vicki, I think often the convention comes from the people who run the businesses that a lot of us worked at in the past. But actually thinking about this stuff in a different way, and as you say, starting from what life do I want to live? How do I want to spend my time? And that might include work, because work for some people, you know, is a good thing. But working backwards from the life you want to lead, as opposed to I need to do this, is probably the way we'd start. But here's the bit I'm curious about. So you wrote the Wealthy Retirement Plan. What was your moment of realization? So you said you realized quite early. What was your moment where you thought, I don't want to do it the conventional way, I want to do it my way?
Oh gosh. Okay. So I think there's this thing where you might know something, but you don't have the language to articulate it. And so it's very easy now, and this is why hindsight's a brilliant thing, that you can go back and you can put it in there. And I would say that it was probably when, I don't know, maybe even like my first few jobs working. So when I came out of school, I'd done everything you were supposed to do. You know, I'm so old, it was O levels and A levels, and then had a Saturday job at Marks and Spencer's. And because I didn't know what I wanted to do, nobody had ever asked me, Vicki, what do you want to do? What I wanted to do was be Jacques Cousteau's undiscovered granddaughter and swim all the warm waters of the world. That's what I wanted to do. I even checked out being an underwater photographer and went down to Plymouth University. But then underwater photography seemed to be the best paying, seemed to be in the North Sea, taking photographs of gas leaks in underwater, you know, the wells.
Yeah, not exactly Jacques Cousteau territory, is it?
No, and certainly not warm water, and very much more tech diving, whereas I just wanted to float around with the fishies type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I flopped into full-time work at M&S. Now, I'm still a huge fan of M&S. They trained me really well right in the beginning. I don't know if they do that so much these days, but it was a great start. But this idea of having to show up at a place, I love sorting socks, but it didn't inspire me. There were bits in the job that I did enjoy doing. I liked it when I got to work in the catering. I liked the stock taking. Interestingly, I was completely rubbish at stock taking. My stock taking every week was wrong, and yet I'm supposed to be good with numbers, but there's obviously something wrong with my ability to stock take. And then I sort of flopped out because I live near the airport, so I got a job at Heathrow, as you do, and I was just sort of like literally wet fish flopping out of one job into another, and then finally got a job in Reading for an insurance company called Commercial Union, and through Commercial Union learned about mortgages, and I ran their mortgage department, and that was the seed of this job.
Yeah.
But the job I enjoyed was when I was a university lecturer, and I did that for 11 years. And that idea of opening the door to a room full of things that the people on this side knew nothing about. And those that want to walk through can walk through. So I just go down a corridor and I just go, open the door on this, and then I'm going to open the door on that, and open the door on this, and just say to people, look, there's all this knowledge you can go to. And then really watching people come alive as they get a new understanding for something, that juiced me. But that was never a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job. And so I realized that maybe what I wanted to do is make sense of the world for myself and then share what I understood with other people. And I think that sort of encapsulates everything that I do now, through the podcast, through the books, through the work with my clients. It's my life. I'm living my life. And in the quest for my life, non-traditional, I'm discovering things. And then when I discover something that I think is really interesting, I just sort of blurt it out there. And if anybody else is interested, great.
And I'll tell you what's interesting for me with that is I think you learn better yourself if you part of your nature is educating others, right? You know,
Yes.
it's just that element of learning through teaching is interesting. How do you find that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, every time, and this is why I shy away from the term expert, but every time I have a conversation with a client or I write a book or I do a podcast, I'm actually making notes on the side where I'm getting a deeper understanding of something in the resharing of what I've thought. And that's actually part of how the mind works. If I understand something and I keep it to myself, I'll have one level of understanding. But if I am able to impart it to you and then you understand, that's another level of understanding. If you then come back at me with questions and I can answer them, that's another level of understanding. And
but
that,
also, if you can't, then there's a gap there that you can fill, right?
yes,
you know, that's the interesting thing.
Yes,
yeah,
but it's also not about being 100% certain about anything. I think I sometimes come across as very certain, and I'm not very certain. I'm just very focused, and that you can sort of misunderstand those two things. But in my focus, it sounds quite da-da, Vicki knows it. And it's not arrogance, because actually what I enjoy in the conversation is getting a bit of a pushback, getting that question that goes, you didn't understand, I didn't understand the way you explained that, or you explained that, but have you considered this, that, and the other? Or I disagree. That then expands my knowledge. And that's going to sound selfish, but I enjoy that. That's my joy.
And I think the other interesting thing is there's a bunch of different, like if we're going to be talking about financial independence, there's a bunch of different alternative routes to financial independence that are potentially all part of the same puzzle. And I think sometimes when we're so focused, we go, right, property's got to be the only answer, or business has got to be the only answer, or pensions. You know, and the reality is the most stable, nuanced financial plans that we build for our clients probably contain a lot of different component parts, because then they're spreading their risk.
Totally.
And that element is there. Before we start talking and sharing your insights and knowledge, I've only just heard about Jacques Cousteau, because I watched a documentary on Jacques Cousteau last year, and it's the first time I've heard about him. What an amazing life that guy lived.
I know.
How did you get into him? Was it through the document, like the TV shows he did? How did you know about his life?
I think I'm probably older than you, and he was on the telly, and my early childhood was seeing this guy, and he went down. If you've ever seen like a 1950s movie of how people went under the water, they had this great big bell helmet on it, and it had all this. It had like a cage on the front, and then like a garden hose out the back, and someone was cranking a wheel on the boat.
He invented the scuba, didn't he?
He did.
Invented the scuba suit.
He did. But before he invented it, someone was on the deck cranking the air down to him, and he was just in this bubble of water having a look underneath. And I think also it tied in with the fact that my dad's Italian, and so my whole childhood was spent driving across Europe in a little Fiat 500 or whatever car we had at the time, popping off to Venice to wave to my aunt, his sister there, and then going over to what used to be called Yugoslavia and is now Croatia, but was Italy. So we would go back to this place where he was a child, and the beautiful waters, clear waters, and just sort of like duck diving down off the surface with my snorkel and my mask, and finding sea urchins and seeing fish and being told about the shark nets and all that sort of stuff. It just woke me up as obviously a water baby. So that was brilliant. And then you're right, he invented the scuba tank, and I think I must have been about, say, 17. and I loved to swim, so I was always in my local swimming pool. I noticed the local scuba club come, and they were practicing their skills at the deep end of the pool. And so I asked about it, and that was it. And then I had all my own scuba gear at the age of 18. But I was rubbish at diving in England. We would go down to places like Durdledore and all of that, sort of down the coast every Easter with this group to go swimming, diving, and I would have to carry all my gear down. The boys never helped me, there was none of that. I was this wimpy little 18-year-old, and I had to carry all my weights and my own tank and my own kit all the way down to the beach. And I'd get down there and my lips would be blue or my nails would be blue, and that dive master, he would send me back up the top, and I'd have to carry all the way back up. I did that 2 years running, and the third year I just stayed in the pub that was at the top. I didn't go down at all.
Yeah, well, I think I haven't. I like the sea and I like swimming, but I haven't scubaed, and I think I'm learning internationally in sunnier climes is probably the way I'm going to go. So we've explored quite a lot about your childhood. We've explored about your journey to thinking about this way. Let's fill the gaps. Tell us a bit about you now. What do you do? How do you help people? And talk a little bit about that sort of journey.
Okay. So I think probably the bit that's relevant there is that I ended up, my first marriage produced 2 daughters, but within months of the second child, the marriage was over. In fact, probably the marriage was over before then, if I'm honest about it. And I found myself as a single mom of 2 girls under 3, having to move back in with my mum and dad in their back bedroom. This was not the life I planned, and doing something about it. So that sort of set off 2 routes. It set me off down the, how am I not going to be a stay-at-home single mum? Because I didn't think that would be a role model for my girls. And so that set me off down the university path. I went to do a college course and ended up in university, and then did a master's, and then became a university lecturer. But it also set me off down a path of how important money is. And particularly now, again, I'm looking at it from now and looking back, what I understood was female financial independence or female finances. And I was in a position where I had nothing. I left the marriage. I had £2,000 worth of debt and no home. And the debt was owed to my best friend, who had been funding our lives, which I won't bother to go into all that gory detail there, but she was helping me pay the gas and the electric bills and things like that. So I had to pay her back and get on my own 2 feet. And as much as my mum and dad would have let me live there forever, that's not what I wanted for myself, to get a property and to move on. So I ended up in social housing, and then that split off again. So I've got education and teaching that way. And then over here, I've got the interest in money, financial independence, and then also triggered into property and heading off down the property route. And that sort of pulled it all together. And now what I do is predominantly, I would say that my clients fall into 2 groups. There are those that already know or think that they might like to invest in property, or think that they want to do more with the money that they've got. So they're either business owners or sort of senior corporate jobs. They've got some money behind them, either in the form of equity in their house, deposits, sometimes an inheritance. I've got quite a few clients coming forward with inheritance at the moment. And what we're looking to do is invest in property so that they get a monthly cash flow. And we put that in a limited company and it stays there. So monthly cash flow, but also that potential of capital gain, which you don't get with a regular savings account. So I call my houses little brick banks, because they're little brick savings accounts that give you that monthly income, which you can use if you need when the time is right. But more often, my clients are saving up for a few years because they don't need it now. And then on the other side, I have a lot of, and again, predominantly women, but not always, coming to me, and they're people much earlier in their journey, wanting to understand more about money, wanting to get themselves into a position where they could feel more secure. Never mind independent, they still want security. So talking to them, first of all, how to become resilient. So to sometimes simply understand the debt that they've got themselves into. Sometimes to just talk through going, but if you look at how much you're spending, you'll find that there are things that aren't as important to you as the future that you're saying you want to have. So you can trim those, save that. Before you know it, you'll have 3-6 months money sitting in a bank account. And from that position of resilience and strength,
you can start to build.
Yeah. All of a sudden, the stress drops away and your mind opens. And that's so powerful. But also linking the whole lot back together is this recognition. We were never taught this at school.
Yeah.
We were never taught this at school.
100%. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I all of the research that talks about money is the fact that yes, there is a relationship between money and happiness. Actually, a lot of us spend money on stuff that doesn't make us happy. We buy stuff instead of experiences and all that sort of interesting stuff. But the greatest issue with money is the strain lack of it causes, isn't it? You know, it's that element, and it's like money worry is the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think, and we've been thinking about this a lot when we've been interviewing people for What Happens Next, about what a life well lived looks like, and thinking about wealth in a broader sense. But when you were building the wealthy retirement plan, how were you in your own head defining what wealthy looked like?
I think there's a sentence that describes it, and you can flip this in either direction. What would you do if you never had to work another day just to pay the bills? So that's one way of looking at it. And the other way is a wealthy life is being able to spend your time doing what you love with people you care about.
Yeah.
Or the other way around, doing what you care about with the people that you love.
Yeah. I love that. Absolutely love that. And I think you're right. I think it's that there's a great phrase in a book that I always talk about on What Happens Next. It's called Design Your Life by Bill Burnett. And he's got this thing where he talks about the fact that if you knew you'd never run out of money again, and you knew that nobody would laugh at your journey, how would you spend your time? And it's that, and that's interesting because we've talked about both subjects so far. We've talked about the money side, you know, knowing that we don't need to worry about the money, but also removal of convention.
Yeah.
Like, let's remove that stuff that you assume you need to do and focus on what you actually want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right. And when you're having conversations with group one, these people who have had a career, built a business, they've got money, and you're speaking to them about financial independence, what's their challenges in that space?
That's quite interesting because there's been sort of a shift, and I would have said I've been doing this for 20 years, and I would say the first, see, COVID messes things up with your timeline now, doesn't it? But I would say probably the first 12-ish years, it was predominantly men coming to me, and they were saying this opening sentence, a variation of these words are, I'm missing out on my family. I'm missing out on family life. Yeah. My kids are getting older. I don't get to spend any time with them. I want to give up work. And I'm going, whoa, don't do that. Don't give up work, because all of a sudden you won't be mortgageable. Wait a minute. Let's make a decision. Take a breath, and then sort of digging into it, and then immediately getting into the crunchy questions of how much do you earn? How much do you spend? What life do you want? And then sort of setting out all this foundation, like all these puzzle pieces for them, going, well, you earn this much, you spend that much, you want this life. That's how you're working at the moment. How can we put these pieces together in a way that the picture that results is the picture that you want?
Yeah.
And it's still a variation on that with the women, but the women that come to me now, or change it the other way around. So the partner, if there's a partnership, the person who has to earn the money, which is typically the man, takes on that role for himself. So that's why he says it. And when I get a high earning woman, she doesn't say the same words. Hers are not about wanting to give up work and missing the kids. It's a different tone there. But on the female side, or the nurturing side of a partnership, the stress there is enormous, because frequently the financial provider in the relationship has got this burden on their shoulders that they think is theirs alone to carry. They completely forget that they're in a relationship which may involve a house and a mortgage, or may involve children. They've taken it all on themselves, and they're the hunter-gatherer that has to go out there and club those pound notes over the head and drag them back into the house. Whereas the nurturer, often the mother or the female side of it, is the one having to allocate a lot of this money to pay for the food, to pay for this. And surprisingly, how much the kids cost that dads never seem to find out about, because for some reason, mothers hide all of the spending that they do on their children from the dads. They squirrel money away in order to pay for things, rather than just own up and go, well, there's shoes, there's clothes, there's entertainment. They've got to be part of this club. They've got to, do this activity for school, which means they will go and buy, paper and glue or whatever it is. And the stress they're under is huge. But what they're aware of now is their lack of financial awareness within that relationship, and the vulnerability that that's leaving them with.
I'll tell you what I've been thinking about quite a lot, and I've been really interested on your perspective on this, is the stories we tell ourselves about money. And whether, and I don't want to completely generalize, because you're going to have people out there who have got their own unique perspective.
Oh, yeah.
In your experience, do men and women who come and have conversations with you sit in camps, and what are the stories they tell themselves?
I think that for everybody, there is what they've brought in from their parents and their childhood. Yeah. So it'll be different variations, like mum and they'll be grandparents, won't they? So grandparents had money, so they have money. Then they either go, money's easy, or I like money, or I don't care about money. And then there'll be parents that have had money and then they lost money. So then the kids will go, oh, money's easy come, easy go. I know that if we lose it, we can make it again. Or they'll go, oh, we lost money. Crikey, we really need to hang on to it, because you might have it now, but it could go tomorrow. And it just triggers that you could not generalize, except the fact that everybody comes forward with something that has come from your past. And if you can just recognize that, I was lucky in that on the one hand, I had quite a risk-taking dad, but I had quite a non-risk-taking mum. And between the two of them, I was just lucky in that relationship that they had those backgrounds. But we still never spoke about money.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think growing up, and this is something that Cassie and I do quite a lot, and with our kids, and try and do some education in this area, is the education is just have open and honest conversations about that sort of stuff, because that's step one, isn't it? Like not treat money as a taboo subject.
Very
different. The other big one for me, and this is, I'm thinking about this quite a lot. In all of these areas, it's like just examining your relationship with money to see whether it rings true or not, and maybe challenging some of those ideas, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I've recorded some podcasts for the end of year 24, beginning of 25, which are all around, first of all, mindset, and whose voice is this that you hear? And it's not just about money, it's about everything. It's about your ability to do something, your confidence, your chance of getting a good relationship, your chance of succeeding at work. All of these voices that are in your head, these little stories that you tell yourself, will have come from somewhere. Some of them may have a foundation, and that foundation may be helpful but may not be. But some of them are absolute rubbish and serve no purpose. And only when you sort your mindset out can you then go one step further, be brave, and start looking at your financial mindset. And then when you've got your financial mindset, then you're off, because now you're in charge of the voices.
Yeah, I think that, I can't remember who said it, but like that element of saying like an unexamined life is a life worth less living than an examined one.
Yes.
I think it's always challenging to look in the mirror and go, I might have been wrong about that for 20 years, but it's actually more empowering when you do it.
And that's the thing. It's empowering, Chris. That's it.
Yeah.
It feels like you have to be so brave and courageous, but actually you'd be almost, excuse me phrasing this way, a fool not to look. Yeah. Yes, you might need to pull your big pants on to do it, but what you see will change your life for the better. And I remember, do you remember when the lottery first came out and my dad said to me, I'm going to buy you the winning ticket. And I remember saying to him, no, please don't, because you'll ruin my life. I'll have to make decisions about what to do with this money, you know, and I like what I've got now. Yeah. And whether you like what you've got or you'd like better than what you've got, what would that impact of winning the lottery do? It's another variation on the question that you did probably 5 or 10 minutes ago of what would you do if you won the lottery? How would you make different decisions? And you might feel afraid of that responsibility of making new decisions. But that is such a powerful position to be in. No one can then tell you ever again how to live your life. There'll be the laws that go around the outside that you've got to follow, but the rest of it, you're going to be, as you say, actively engaged in living your life. I think that's exciting.
But here's the interesting thing about that, Vicki. I don't know what your take on this is. Through my journey towards financial independence, I think if somebody took that away, including all the pain, including like the sleepless nights, including like particularly at the start of the business where you're going, I don't know whether this is going to work or not. I don't know whether I'd be emotionally and intellectually equipped enough to manage wealth.
Oh, I agree.
They talk about lottery winners and people who inherit money and stuff like that, you know, particularly large amounts, as not because they haven't gone through that journey. And you know, again, not this is a broad brush, but you know, there's examples of people turning around and go, well, I've got all the money, I'm going to be okay, and then running out. And you go, how did that happen?
Because they haven't got the financial education. Financial education. And what I was saying with the example of what if you won the lottery ticket is just to use that thought to provoke you to digging out what you're afraid of. There's the lesson. I'm not going to post everybody a winning lottery ticket. I'm merely asking you to have a dream exercise of what if you did win it. What would you say to yourself? What would you do? What decisions would you make? How would you behave differently? And it'd be quite interesting if your response was to spend a lot. So if your response was to spend a lot, is that mirrored in your life now? Or if your response to winning the lottery was to think of all the things that you were going to invest in, are you investing now? And you know, there's no right or wrong answer. And you said this right at the beginning, that for whatever we say on this show, if our whole goals are to get to financial independence, that'll be a different number for everybody and the different starting point and therefore a different route. And it won't be all about property and it won't be all about pensions. It will be what is right for that person, given the resources they've got and the journey that they're on.
100%. But there's a starting point is to examine that life, you know, like here's, and I knew we'd go off on a tangent, Vicki, as all interesting conversations do. but here, no, I'm going to go off on another tangent before we come back.
All right.
Like that, like when I think about my business life and my financial journey to independence and all of that sort of stuff, one of the interesting things for me is what I've learned along the way. So what's been the biggest learning journey for you? What would you have, you've been doing this for 20 years. What did you underestimate 20 years ago that you think is really important now?
Oh, dear me. What did I underestimate? I do this quite a bit to myself. I'm very hard on myself. I'm very critical of the decisions I've made in the past. And I think that when I set out, I did it by learning. I think, first of all, learning the mindset, and that opened my ideas to all of that. I did my whole NLP training. Then I went away and I learned property. And when I learned property, I did it in this big group from this big company. And we were all just being put through, the factory line, basically, show up and do this class, then show up and do that class. No one was relating it to me, that the theory and the practical application of it are very, very different. And what I did in those early days, I am proud of. But with the knowledge I have now, I would go back and I would do them differently. And I think that what that's enabled me to do is to enable the clients that I work with, either the ones that I find the properties for or the ones that I teach how to find properties for themselves, is to be that them 20 years in the future, to be that person that can make a better decision, because they can use my 20 years of experience to make better decisions for themselves, to have that bigger vision. I very definitely did that. We sat down as a family group and we had a board meeting and we had a strategy, and no one in the family, although poor Bob, my husband, has been dragged kicking and screaming to the point where he walks alongside me. But in the early days, he was everybody's busy doing their thing. And just because you as one member of a family go, oh, the light bulb's come on for me, you cannot assume that the light bulb, that others in your family have a light bulb, that they are prepared to switch it on, that when it switches on, it doesn't explode. You cannot expect people to come with you on this journey right away at the beginning. And it can be a lonely journey to step out, but that's part of the being brave with your big pants on.
Love that.
If you are right, you need to go for it, because not only will you be ploughing the way for them to follow, you remember walking down that corridor, opening the doors, and others can learn along the way.
100%.
And
I think the
future.
I think the interesting thing for me is then your focus changes, and it's like I really like that analogy of opening the doors and going, look, have a look. Yeah, you do you, but here's the opportunity you've got to think differently. But yes, mindset's going to be a big one. Let's talk practically. So how do people take those first natural practical steps into their own version of financial independence?
So I have a very specific pathway I take people on, and I know I've had a few of my clients going, why are we doing this? Or afterwards they're going, I didn't really want to do that, but now I did it. I know why you did it with me. And I very much take everybody back to values. And I've got a values manual that I share with everybody. And that's sort of from my NLP training, neurolinguistic, because if you don't understand what's important to you, and if you're going to work in a family group, you don't have this conversation with them, you can find that we're using the wrong words. So I had one married couple, and we were talking about the words rich and wealth. And I have a very specific meaning of wealth. Rich is what's in your bank account. Wealth is what's in your life. One of them had that same definition as me. The other had it the other way around. Wealth was about money and rich was about the quality of your life. So when we spoke, there's this argument because we're actually speaking the wrong way around.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I wanted to bring this up. And the other thing is that out of the values workbook, I get everybody to create a values statement. And the values statement is set in the present. I am, even though you're working towards. And mine is, I am focused. Oh my goodness. I'm the so least focused person in the world, but I work at it. I work at it every day to be focused. It's just not a natural skill, but I know how important it is. So I am focused, and then there's the whole of the rest of my statement. But that statement is there to be on the wall and be that constant reminder of why we're going to go down this path that is going to require you to have your big pants on and come across things that you're going to find challenging, that will bring up things that you maybe didn't even know that you thought, that are so deeply buried, but will be shaping everything in your life, from your financial success, your health, your relationships, your career, everything. They'll all be in there. Now, not everybody has big, it doesn't always turn into sort of like a a 10-year psychological counseling session, but it's that bringing it up and going, oh my goodness, I remember when my granddad used to say that, or my dad used to do that, or yeah, my mum was very like that. And then it's fine. You've gone, oh, I know where it's come from. And then you can just ask yourself the question of, is that relevant to me now? Is that helpful?
Yeah.
If it's helpful, great. If it's not helpful, not. And then once we've gone through the values, even though you want to talk to me about learning how to invest in property or getting me to do it for you, I want to know that you know how to look after your money. I want to know that you know how to work an Excel spreadsheet and that fill it in with your income and your expenses for at least that first month. And then let's look at it and be brave to do that. And the reason for that is, if we're going to go down a conversation that's going to require, in most cases, that you take on 75% debt. When you're going to buy a house, it's 75% debt. Not only is it 75% debt, it's 25% of your actual cash plus however much extra cash you've got to stick on the top for all of the buying costs and the refurb costs. There's a lot of money going into this one brick unit. I need to know that you are prepared to pay attention to the maths of it. There is no such thing as hands-free investing. There is no, all this turnkey, hands-free, armchair rubbish. That way lies disaster.
Be aware of what you're going into, and be aware that actually, if somebody's selling you a easy way to get financial independence, you probably want to question that in a quite robust way. I really agree with that, and I think what's interesting, and my clients of Savello are really similar. You know, high earning or fairly financially independent people. The interesting thing is we always take it back to basics, and we go back to that budget plan. And they go, what do you mean a budget plan? What do I need to do a budget plan for? And we go, because actually the fundamental amount of financial independence is knowing how much is enough. And actually the budget plan, and it's really weird because like I did a budget plan for a client the other day who's got he's in his mid-40s, quite a high earner insolvency business, one of the partners in the insolvency business. And what I asked him to do is take all the stuff that might go when it's financially independent, and the kids are a bit older, but also add a bit more money for the stuff he wants to do with his time. I think a lot of people underestimate that as well. But really, really important points. And going back to basics with the budget plan, I'm a real advocate for. But also, can you work a spreadsheet is a key factor.
And I know there are apps, Chris. There are plenty of apps for people who, and I speak to, I don't know about you, so many people who are maths phobic. What school has done to people, and I cannot believe, I don't know, we could wander down a conspiracy route here. How can maths been taught for 40-something years in such a way to instill so much fear and loathing into the general public? I haven't done this piece of research, but I'd love a piece of research that just gets people to vote. Do you love maths or do you hate maths? And I reckon, sticking my neck out here, that the overwhelming people will not like maths, not like Excel spreadsheets or any of that type of stuff, that they just either not interested in it, don't like it, or don't think they're good at it. How can the education system have failed so many people that when they go to the supermarket, they can't actually tell what is an actual offer? And is that not a way to keep us all trapped?
I think it's fascinating because I got approached about 4 or 5 years ago, Vicki, to sponsor a classroom of kids through a financial education program. So they said, look, we haven't got the money in the budget. Would you, at Savello, pay for it? And I was like, love to, but I'd love to actively get involved and go in and talk to the kids and stuff like that. And my experience was that as soon as you make maths practical and understand how it practically applies to everybody's day-to-day lives, the dynamic changes a bit.
Totally.
And I've never used trigonometry. I mean, I did A-level maths. I've never used trigonometry. No. I don't know whether, like Sophie's coming to me at 13 with these equations, and I'm going, I can sort of do them, but you're never going to need it.
No, I know. So,
That might be the
you-
wrong. If there's any parents out there, that might be the wrong message to give. I don't
No,
want
no.
to. I don't want to go down that road.
I so agree. That's
My
literally
experience was that when these kids, I mean, like under teaching kids about inflation and compounding and going, this is how it applies to your life, was really interesting.
Yeah.
Now the challenge was we went back the following year and said we're going to sponsor it again, and they said we'd love to take your money, but we haven't got time in the curriculum.
Yes.
And I suppose you've got to question what we're consistently teaching our kids on an ongoing basis to say, is it the right balance? And I don't know. We haven't talked a lot about property, so we need to do that.
Okay, let's do
Tell me how you see property as a part in somebody's journey to financial independence and part of their long-term investment strategy.
So for me, property is the one and only tangible thing. Not that you are allowed by law to go and stroke your bricks, because you'd be interfering with your tenants, but you could theoretically stroke the bricks of a buy-to-let investment, whereas stocks and shares and everything else, if you go stroking Tesco's or M&S, you'll probably get arrested, etc. So it's a tangible investment. It is an investment that generates a monthly return, but it's also got, and I will use the word, a potential for capital gain. The capital gain is, and I'm going to use this very loosely, almost guaranteed, because we live on an island and there's not enough space, so property prices will go up. The question is always how long. It's not necessarily going to go up in the next year. You might have to wait 10 years, you might have to wait 20 years. But none of the other things that I've looked at do the same for you. That they can give you the monthlies, they can give you this chance of capital gain. They allow you to then leverage. So yes, you might be able to get returns and future returns and everything else, but will the bank lend you 3/4 of the money to then invest in that thing?
Yeah.
Not a loan. So you're only putting in 1/4 of your money plus the overheads bits. You're then getting a monthly return on it. You've then got this potential for capital gain. Throughout the lifestyle of this, or the lifespan of this brick building society, you can refurbish it and force the appreciation. You can alter it. If you have a house, you could put a loft extension on, new windows, you could add an extra bathroom, geography allowing. So there's so much that you can do with property. And then the best thing for me is that, because we all are forced through government and they love to interfere, that's a whole nother podcast, you're doing it in a limited company, that if you don't take the money out of the limited company, yes, you will be ultimately liable to corporation tax when the business makes a profit. So there's a difference between the cash flow, which will happen the minute your tenants go in, and making a profit, which will be what the accountant sorts out for you later. But in the meantime, if your money is sitting in there, there's no reason why you couldn't look at how you can then invest that money. So that's up to financial advisors to advise. But if you invest your big lump into property, leveraging it with your 75% loan to value, you get more assets. Then from your assets, you get income. And from that income, you then look to invest in maybe a pension, if you haven't already got one, or maybe bonds or other things, to spread that risk. But what's happening is that your tenant is paying for your pension or your bonds or your other investments.
Gotcha.
And the bank has paid for 3/4 of it.
Yeah. So
and it just feels like a nice flow to stick it out that way.
I suppose the interesting thing is you're right. The element of leverage that you've got potentially changes the dynamic, but my experience in talking to my clients about this is it can also change the margins of risk, can't it? Because particularly if you've got interest rates going up, a perfectly profitable property, I didn't mean to do that alliteration either, Vicki, might change as interest rates change. I know you can manage the mortgage rates and stuff like that. So how do you manage the risk element on that? And what do you need to factor in when you're thinking about property purchase?
So the first thing is maths and spreadsheets, obviously, which is why we do the exercises in the front. But I think probably one of the first things to say is that while interest rates, let's just call them roughly 5% at the moment, or Bank of England, etc., this is not new. This is the rate that I started with.
Yeah.
What we've had in recent history, post Brexit, with the ridiculous, 0.5% on base and mortgages at 1% and 2% and all that sort of stuff, that is unusual. That is not normal. That was a window. And actually what that did was that caused a whole pile of people to pile into property without doing the maths, without paying attention to the risk, without looking at what's the cost if it goes up, and then having that as a problem. So if you do the spreadsheet, not only are you factoring in your interest rate at the top, but you're also looking at what's the cash flow. Have I got a good enough margin there that if the interest rate goes up, can I do it? When your mortgage comes towards the end of its term, know what's going on in the market. You might not be that interested in all of the politics and everything else that's going on, but you need a general awareness of what's going on in the market so that you can speak to your broker quickly enough. So when we had that whole Liz Truss debacle, interest rates went up to over 6%. I had a mortgage coming up for remortgage at that time. As soon as my mortgage came up for within its 6 months window, I went to my broker and I secured my mortgage. So I had a mortgage offer at, I think it was 3.1 or 2, something like that. I then tracked it just for 3 months. Liz Truss had been in, everything had gone haywire, spoke to the broker, and there was nothing better out there on the market, obviously. So I kept mine, went forward another 2 months, had another look. Now I'm in the final month before my mortgage runs out. I'm having a check. There is nothing around, but I've got 3.1.
Yeah, you've secured the deal already.
And then I flip over onto that. So you can plan for these. The other things you need to be aware of is, I'm very sorry to say it, tenants, but the tenants' costs go up. So whenever the government fiddles, like the government has fiddled at the moment, they've added 2% to the cost of stamp duty for every buy-to-let investor. Bearing in mind, we're the ones providing homes at the moment because the government is all talk about what it's going to do, but it's not delivering. We're delivering. We're now paying an extra 2%. Who thinks paying that 2%? I'm not paying it. My vendors are paying it. People I'm buying houses off are being forced to negotiate down their asking prices. And I've had clients where sales have pulled out because people, are stuck negotiating on it. So that's another impact there. And when the mortgage rate goes up, ultimately what you should be doing with your tenant all the time is just nudging that rent up 5 or 10% every year. So that they can get used to the rent going up, but also when the changes happen, you're not suddenly turning around and seeing there's a £200 gap and trying to turn to somebody who's been paying you 500 to say, pay me 7, or someone who's paying 7 to say, pay me 9. You'd have been sneaking it up by 50 to 75 pounds a month every year for 5 years of your mortgage term. And if the mortgage is higher when you remortgage, your rent is higher.
It's factored in, isn't it?
Totally.
It's factored in.
But that's financial planning.
That regular rent review is key, but I think it's also, and we say this to our clients, particularly in times of volatility, just zoom out, because actually when you're holding wealth assets, it's never designed to be short term. It's designed to be a longer term thing.
Absolutely.
Vicki, I could carry on for another hour, but I can't because I've got the meeting coming up. So where can people find out a bit more about you?
Well, hopefully you'll stick everything in the show notes, but if you can spell my name, Vicki is Vicki, that's the hardest bit that people get wrong. You can find me on all the socials. So not particularly good on LinkedIn, more friendly on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I've got a podcast of my own, a Wealthy Life podcast, which is on Spotify and iTunes. And there's a YouTube channel as well.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for speaking to me today. And next time, and we'll have you back, next time we might talk a bit more about property.
Let's do that. Let's do that.
All right. Have a lovely day. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.